This episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast is sponsored by Guardian Grains, growing nutrition you can see. Welcome to the Crackin Backs Podcast. Today we are joined by Amanda Carlson-Phillips, a true pioneer in the field of human performance. As the Vice President of Nutrition and Research for EXOS, Amanda has spent nearly 20 years transforming the way athletes, military professionals, and organizations optimize their potential. With advanced degrees in sports nutrition and exercise physiology, she's mastered the art of building high-performance systems that go way beyond just fitness. Oh, Amanda Carlson, welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you on. It's been a long time since we've spoke. I'm really glad you're on. Thank you for being with us today.
Me too. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's awesome to see you. It has been for sure way too long. I don't think I want to count the years, but it's awesome to be here.
I know. I think you've had a couple kids now already, and you're
just one. But I have a bit. I have a standard poodle as well, and he's a kid in his own right. I think he's more of a challenge than my 13-year-old. So yes. So but lots of life has happened in between the times that the last time I saw you.
Oh, well, that's great. We all have dogs, so we can relate. They're like kids as well.
They are
sometimes better than kids. But anyway, I didn't just say that.
Yes,
did I?
for another topic.
That's another podcast.
Right.
That'd be a good podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So Amanda, it has been a long time, and you've been doing this for a long time. Nutrition is your thing, performance, peak performance, training athletes at high levels, low levels, all sorts of levels. Is there one thing that you can think back to time? Because nutrition and performance training seems to completely evolve itself over and over again. What was good last year is terrible this year and so on. Is there one thing that you see that has been totally ineffective and counterproductive that really irks you sometimes when you hear about it?
Oh, great question. Yes, having been doing this for 21 years now, starting with EXOS 21 years ago, and loving the concept of fueling athletes, I think, the thing that makes me crazy is when people really chase the trends. And so it's the trend chasers and the trend chasing, which is so easy to do, that I think just takes people off path and creates a lot of confusion. And it's just if people would get back to basics and really nail the fundamentals, we'd make so much more progress. So it's the chasing of the trends. I hate to call them fads, but they're just trends.
Hey, on that note, really quick, Spence. On that note, really quick, when you started 21 years ago, you were dealing with commercials, which would drive the trends. Now you're dealing with influencers. How have you seen that change from a commercial to an influencer?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot more. I don't want to call it noise. There's a lot more information to process. And so you're absolutely right. It's like 21 years ago, there might have been one or two or three narratives going on. Now there could be an infinite number of nutritional narratives going on. And so for the end consumer, or for individuals that don't have a lot of scientific background or foundational knowledge in the science of biochemistry, because that's what nutrition is, and it is complex, but in another realm it's not. But when you have all of these different ideas and thoughts and trends, it's even harder to make sense of it for an individual, and just deciding like, what is it that I'm going to eat, or what is it that I'm going to drink? And so trying to navigate all of that in your brain is so much more complex for that individual who just wants to make an improvement in themselves. With that, though, I will say that I'm really glad that there are more influencers, and especially different scientific influencers, because it is raising the level of conversation, and I think creating a higher level of intellectual investment in this space. So yes, it creates many more inputs that as humans we have to analyze and understand and then take action upon. But in general, I think we're having a much more elevated and scientific conversation because of many of the influencers that we've ever had.
Do you get posed with these questions maybe on a daily basis that you have to diffuse because, and yet it makes you, you become cautious because you have to think about, well, they're kind of right, but not completely right. But they are definitely trying to make, the influencers are trying to make an impact on the public. So when everybody's going this way, they always come up with something that goes the opposite direction to get noticed. Do you have difficulty trying to share that with your athletes?
Yeah, I think it's like sharing it with the athletes, sharing it with the world. I think all of us, as we come back and we hear this information, like we do have to realize we are all an N of one, and so each of us are. We have our own individual biology. We have our own individual goals. We are on a journey, as an athlete or a corporate executive, and thinking about, well, how is nutrition, how is my fueling strategy going to play a role in achieving this next level of performance. And so I think what I always start with as we are thinking about this with athletes, or again, any high performer, who are you? Where are you in your journey? What is your unique, goals and biochemistry look like? And then let's start to piece these elements together. So I say that, like, I think that's this next level of fueling for performance. I still think that the foundational aspects are really important. And I think they get us most of the way there, but nonetheless, we are all individuals. And the more we think about our unique physiology, biology, psychology, the more fine-tuned we can get with all of these different strategies, which on their own are oftentimes valid, but for you, are they the best place to start?
Let's talk pasta, oats, grains, and more. I'm gluten-free, and this one item I can have without any consequences. Since we always talk about fueling our bodies the right way, that's where Guardian Grains comes in. No kidding. Their products are a massive shift towards healthy eating. Guardian Grains is all about healthy, sustainable grains that not only taste great, but are great for you and the planet. Whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, Guardian Grains has you covered with all kinds of nutrition that keep you going strong. Perfect for long days of just living life. Plus, knowing it's sustainably grown, that's a win-win. Sincere appreciation goes to the Guardian Grains for sponsorship of this episode and for making it easy to stay healthy while supporting sustainable farming. Click the link below the description to buy some of your own. You'll taste the difference.
Man, I love that you said that, and it's worth repeating. When they come in to you, you take a history. You find out what their goals are, what they've done maybe in the past that's worked or not worked. And that cuts away a lot of the fads or the trends, and allows you to really zoom in on what's most important and what's most applicable. I forgot to think that way, because I'm just thinking people come at you with all sorts of different stuff, but it's really up to you to ask the right questions. And that's where you benefit versus an influencer who just poses something on Instagram and they go, oh, I think I'm going to try that, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, it's a great part about working with a professional or someone that helps you navigate all of that. Like back to Dr. Terry's point around, all these additional influencers, all these additional thoughts. At the end of the day, what does it mean for you and your goals and what you are trying to achieve, and ultimately your what does high performance mean to you as an athlete or an executive?
So I'm going to use a buzzword that's become so popular these days, and I want to hear your perspective on it. The word is biohacking. Everybody's biohacking. So how do you feel about that? Any thoughts on shortcuts or peak performance, or what's truly sustainable, as far as habits that you wish people would focus on instead?
Well, back to like things that irk you. I don't think biohacking is like a trigger word, but it definitely has like a visceral response. But no, I think about it in two ways. So to me, biohacking today means that individuals are embracing the science. And so they're embracing the science. They're thinking about some way that they can optimize their performance. So if you are considering yourself a biohacker, that means that you are interested in integrating solutions to achieve a higher level of performance. So I think that, I embrace that in a certain realm. On the other side, I think back to the concept of like chasing trends. It's like you keep trying different things. I'm going to biohack this, or I'm going to take this supplement over here, or I'm going to fast over there, or I'm going to try this over here. And you get really like attention deficit disorder with all of these hacking techniques. And so I think like that's, so, if we kind of come back to the basics and we understand you as an individual and N of one, what are the most advanced scientific strategies, or the most foundational scientific strategies also are very effective, but what are those nutritional fueling strategies that are going to help you? And so I embrace the biohackers. I think, like I said before, we're having a different level of intellectual discussion, but you got to be able to commit and play the long game and be really strategic around how you're architecting your fueling strategy for high performance.
I probably neglected to preface this because I know you well enough that we brought you on to lecture to our, some of our sports programs in the past, but please share what you're doing right now and why you're such an authority on nutrition and peak performance.
Yeah, so I've been with EXOS. It's a human performance coaching company, like I said, for 21 years. I started with Mark Verstegen, our founder, in 2003, and his vision was to integrate the disciplines of mindset, nutrition, movement, recovery, bring together specialists, facilities, platforms to enhance the performance of the elite athlete. And that's how we started. And so over the last 21 years, we've been doing that. So with some of the most elite athletes, teams, leagues in the world, but we've expanded that because humans are humans, and humans who want to excel are in the military, they are in corporate America, they are just living in the community. And so we've really expanded our approach to thinking about, how do we help individuals achieve these levels of high performance? And because humans are humans. And so fueling, and that's, how we position nutrition, because it is around, how you are giving your body the raw ingredients to be awesome, to be ready for your moment that matters. That has been an integral part around how we are unlocking new levels of potential, for those athletes, for those operators, for, corporate America from an individual aspect, but then also thinking about how the infrastructure of sport, the infrastructure of the military, the infrastructure of corporate America creates environments where fueling strategies come to life. And so it's like, if you have a bunch of junk everywhere in a fueling station for an athlete, how are they going to magically make great fueling options, arrive? And so that's a lot of it as well. So it's thinking about the individual. How do you utilize the best science, but also really relatable strategies? Because the best science, it could be the best science in the world, but if the right fueling options don't end up in the body of the person on the other side that you're working with, it doesn't matter. And so nonetheless, it's been a lot of fun seeing how we can unlock these levels of potential for humans that just really want to achieve the next level of performance.
You're very modest, because when I was talking to Spencer, you're one of I want people to understand in this 12 minutes into the show that you're one of the top performance nutritionists in the country. And you're not just some person that's just off the street corner at a booth waiting to help fuel somebody. And so I want people to realize how good you really are working with the professionals. And I know it's human nature to be modest, but you're way beyond what people think you are. And so with that note, this is a complex question. But but this is something I wanted to ask you. 21 years ago, when you would go to an event, whether it was a combine for NFL, whether it was a pro bike race, that even the Tour de France or stuff like that, you would see Gatorade, a couple power bars, maybe a power gel, right? Now you've got, in football, you've got NIL money, you've got 17-year-olds that are worth millions, you've got X Games, you got all this stuff, and it's gotten so much more complicated. And how do you navigate this 17-year-old who's trying to make a pro worth millions, sign an NIL deal, or a kid that's doing Spartan, or, I mean, you're looking even, and I'm sorry for rambling, but you're looking at Ironmans and marathons. People are doing 2-hour marathons where they weren't doing that before. How do you navigate the explosion of genetics versus the explosion of nutritional performance science?
Really interesting perspective. If I think about, yes, this evolution, and I appreciate the accolades as well. I mean, it has been, I've had the opportunity to work with and lead a team that is working with the top athletes in the world. 30% of the NFL draft about every year is coming through an EXOS facility and living and breathing their preparation for the NFL combine. So yes, we have been working with the elite of the elite in both sport, military, I would say, and corporate America, but for another time. But as we think about kind of the evolution, I mean, yes, there is more money, there is more commitment. There's more at stake, I would say, as well, for these athletes and these individuals to be performing at a high level even earlier. And so I think that's a really interesting evolution that is happening, where athletes today are not just thinking about game day, where you would see the Gatorades and, you know, the various gels or goos or bars kind of thrown around at a college campus or set up maybe more neatly in a pro world. But now you have these very specific strategies, or those that are really doing it well are doing it well. But they're thinking from an athlete perspective, you know, what does that athlete look like? I go back to the N of 1, like what is their biology? What nutritional deficiencies are they presenting with? Like, you know, what potential genetic SNPs do they have that are going to keep them from metabolizing certain nutrients in a certain way? That information is all available. And so you can think about, well, what is that unique, again, biochemistry of that individual? Now, how do you think about how do they live throughout the day? What's their fueling strategy? What's their fueling strategy around training? Because that fueling strategy is all around adapting, getting the body to adapt from the training. And I think that's like one of the biggest acceleration points that we have seen in the creation of faster, stronger, more durable athletes. But really thinking about how are you fueling around that training event? Because most athletes are spending much more time, as we know it, training than competing. And so, you know, you have that element, you're dialing that in based on, you know, which periodization phase they're in for their macro cycle of the year. And then you get into, you know, more game day strategies, which, you know, it's very acute. But, you know, back to the original question, kind of this evolution and shift. 21 years ago was all about game day. And now you're expanding that nutrition strategy to make sure that you are fueling for foundation, you are fueling to adapt, and then you just are fueling to perform in that particular moment. And you can see how athletes, especially the ones that are performing at the high level sustainably for longer, have really incorporated this into the way, their ethos as an athlete. It's not something else. It just is the way.
Are you analyzing this, or like when a new patient comes in or a new athlete you've never met versus the athletes you know very well? How are you doing your testing? Is it pure history? Are you doing food journals? Are you doing blood work? Are you doing urinalysis? Are you doing the initial test? Do you monitor it monthly? Do you monitor it quarterly? How does that look?
Yeah, it's a combination of all of those things, and it just depends. So in our environment, in particular, we're seeing athletes in the off season, and so we're seeing them for more acute, like shorter periods of time, like training for the combine or NFL off season or Major League Baseball prep. So we're kind of like we're that in between area of when athletes come when they're not with their teams. And so we always like, I think about the categories that we want to understand. And so we want to understand first and foremost, like what are the athlete's goals? Then we want to understand kind of where they are in their journey. And that's from a training, from a physical therapy standpoint, like what does that athlete look like holistically? And then we start to think about the various nutritional elements. And so, when we think about and consider, the categories that we're really interested in, we want to understand body composition. We want to understand how that athlete is utilizing their fuel. We want to understand what their nutrient profiles look like. So, what is the biochemistry of like the nutrient availability? So there's different ways that we can get at that for different people. And some of it can be qualitative, but as often as we can have the quantitative piece, the biomarkers, it just paints a much more specific picture. And I really, the more we can have that information on athletes, the more we all can have that information, I think is just so important because like we have done research. This was actually, a study. It's almost like I think 8 or 9 years old now. But we took a group of our combine athletes, and there was some Major League Baseball players in there as well. And we said, hey, like we just want to understand, like let's look at a bunch of biomarkers and see where they all are trending. And we had over 100 markers that we were looking at. But the really interesting part of the finding was that of those athletes, there were zero that had a perfect profile. And there were patterns where there was more predominant levels of deficiency or inadequacy or out of range kind of nutrients. And so those 5 categories that we were looking at that were really consistent in these athletes were vitamin D, omega-3, arachidonic acid to EPA ratio, which is a marker of your body's ability to like chomp up the inflammation, magnesium, and then homocysteine. So those five kind of markers or those 5 categories were pretty much out of range for everybody. And so the last point on this one that I'll make is like when you think about just the magnitude of this, so like 18% of the athletes had 3 of those that were out of range, 41% had 4 out of range, and 41% had all 5 out of range. Wow. And so when you think about that, it's like why we should all be compelled to want to understand our own biochemistry because it then drives a strategy to be much more specific. Last point on that, and now I'm rambling. We did the same blood draws on executives. Very similar profiles. And so when I go back to like humans are humans, whether you want to perform on the on the pitch in soccer or the field on Sunday, or you have to perform in the boardroom, our bodies underneath the skin, they need some work. And so so that's how I see it today and how we're thinking about measuring for athletes and individuals that come in.
On that note, you were talking about how everybody's just training and driving and even Spencer and I have talked about this before with the NIL, and people are just starting younger and younger. Let's talk about recovery and what is the most misunderstood aspects that you see from active individuals that are overlooked, because if everybody is deficient, well, they're obviously not refueling. So what's your talk on recovery techniques that you are seeing make a real impact?
Yeah, I think recovery is such a hot word right now. It's another one that's getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so, because I think work plus rest equals adaptation, and like work plus rest equals success, and that rest or that recovery being a more proactive way to think about it is the limiting factor to performance in so many ways. And so to go back to the same concept, like recovery, is multidimensional. And so how it's understanding the stress, and I use stress as like a very positive term, because without stress, our bodies cannot evolve and change. And so if we keep doing the same thing, we will end up in the same place. So it takes some type of load on the system to create adaptation. And so I think number one in that is understanding the load in which you are putting your body under. And that could be the psychological load. It could be the mechanical load. It could be the metabolic load. So there's different types of load that we're putting our bodies under. So understanding like the training environment is probably the easiest to understand, because you're going to do a certain type of training program. And so what is the load? Is that a more metabolic phase? Is it a more strength production phase? So really understanding what you're doing, and then thinking about the nutritional strategy to recover from that. So if it's higher metabolic, you're driving through more fuel, more carbohydrate in the body, refuel with more carbohydrate. If it is, a truly adaptive phase, make sure the protein is in there. But then, from other elements, you may need other nutrients to come in and support. And so I think that's the number one unlock when we think about recovery, is that all load is not created equal. Really understand the stress, that good work that you are doing to your body, and adapt appropriately. And so that level of specification is what I think is really needed for individuals to optimize that next level performance.
Before we leave this topic, a lot of time if you don't recover, you hit another term called burnout, and a lot of athletes will get burnout. And what are some of the particular approaches or mindsets you do to try and shield that person from reaching that breaking point? Because athletes have to be at that breaking point for top performance, and it's such a fine line between going to over one side and down the other side. So how do you keep them at that sharp point where they recover, they perform, but they don't break?
Yeah. Gosh, burnout is definitely everywhere. And I kind of go back to it and I think about athletes, and solving for, kind of getting them to that edge and not going over. But then also in corporate America, like it's the same type of thing. And so, we hear burnout all over the place in the media, but when you go underneath the skin and you look at physiologically what's happening, it is an under recovery problem, just like you mentioned, Dr. Terry. So it's like, if we think about, what is going to be most effective to prevent our bodies and our brains and just ourselves from hitting that point of overtraining or hitting that point of burnout, which really is just under recovery, it is thinking about how you're incorporating the acute recovery sessions in, just like we mentioned. Fueling is an incredible way to do that, making sure you're having enough carbohydrate, making sure you have the right levels of protein, making sure foundationally you have the right nutrients to work with, your essential fatty acids, your B vitamins, etc. So how do we prevent the burnout from happening? Making sure foundationally, physiologically, those athletes are set. Making sure, as we think about the training environments, that there is enough down regulation happening. So, whether that is on the mechanical side, in just overall physiology, and so making sure the recovery is happening from a mechanical load. Metabolic, you've got great elements and tools, from compression to cold water immersion, breath work. And so there's elements there from a metabolic. Nutrition plays a big role in that. You also think about the psychological load, and how are you making sure to recover? Down regulatory breath work is another great one there. So the last element that I think drives into recovery, and this is a very straightforward, specific, it seems super easy, but it's gotten a ton of attention, is sleep in general. And so if you're doing all of those things and you are sleeping like garbage and not getting effective sleep, not getting enough sleep, you're not getting the benefit of all of those other things. So the cure to burnout is, I would say cure is a very buzzwordy, hacky type word, but to prevent you from getting to that space, think about what you're doing. Make sure you have enough down regulation type techniques through breath work, through nutrition, through cold water immersion, through other elements. Well, cold can be somewhat upregulatory, but making sure you have those set throughout your day and your training, and then prioritizing your sleep. So I think like those are the main things. And then there are markers you can look at, as professionals or individuals. How is your heart rate variability changing? I think this is the realm where, whichever sensor you want to wear, whether it's a Whoop strap, my Oura ring is charging, it's an Oura ring, whatever it is, your body will start to tell you when things are changing, and especially during sleep. So I think that's another real unlock that's become available over the last 5 years, to just see what's going on, to make sure we catch it before it really crosses the chasm.
I got one question. Sorry, Spence. I got one question. This is a total personal question. Do you like the Oura ring or do you like the Whoop? Because I'm looking at one of them both. What do you like the best?
Okay, so both of them.
Sorry,
Fitbit, like all of them are tracking similar things. So,
right.
For me personally, like for sleep data, like I think I don't want something on my wrist, and so I like the Oura ring. I like the data coming off the Oura ring. But for the athletes that we work with, and for you personally, whichever form function is going to work best for you. Like I am not sleeping with something on my wrist. Like it's just never going to happen. So,
okay.
I think about it with the athletes. It's like, number one, pick something you can be consistent with.
That's
and
fair.
Like, don't like shift back and forth. Like let's pick the one, and let's go from there. But the one benefit that the Whoop does have, if you can like handle something on your wrist, which I will never be able to do, you can wear it all day. So you can get you can get your training data, you can get all of it in one place. So
okay.
At this point, I wear my Apple Watch for training, and I wear a Whoop for sleep. I'm super complicated and a PIA, so big pain in the ass, but
all right.
I try to do better.
Thank you for indulging that with me, and thank you, Spencer, for allowing me to butt in, because I've been going back and forth, and I came to that conclusion that it's a personal thing, but I wanted to hear your response.
Yeah, I can't. So what are you going to do?
I'm gonna probably
Which
go
one
with
are
the
you
Whoop,
gonna
because I sleep with stuff on my wrist, so I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, you're good. Yeah, you're definitely lower maintenance. Yeah, so go
Yeah,
Whoop.
but
Yeah,
I don't know if I want
Whoop.
something on both wrists. I'll feel like Wonder Woman with something on both wrists. So.
I mean, that would be awesome. You would be ready to take on the day in the morning.
Right?
I mean, that could be a whole thing. Like, yeah, that's good. All right, next time I'll either see you stacking devices, or you'll be Wonder Woman. One of the two. I mean, it both will be awesome. I mean, it's very trendy to stack bracelets, so you can just stack sensors.
I like it.
That's great. I was wondering what she was going to say, because the answer could end up being a sponsor for her
Right.
or us. It's going to be great.
We always like to be like in. It's always we can pull the data. We pull data from multiple sources. The big thing for us is consistent data, but we like to offer
That's
different.
so funny. Oh, Amanda. So let me. I don't know why that really got me off guard. That was funny. So I want to, before I ask you a question about what you would do for the average person, the weekend warrior or what have you, before I ask you that, I want to, kind of lead off of what we were talking about just a moment ago. But athletes are typically overachievers, high performers. You give them advice, they take it to the 10th degree. Have you had any issues? I mean, I know we've had. I'll give you an example of a pitcher for the New York Mets a couple years ago was told when he gets to Florida, hydrate. Well, he ended up, in the 9th inning and starting to feel numbness and tingling in his arm, and he was like in denial because he's the closer, and they were on the verge of winning or losing with the next pitch. They ended up winning. He walks off the dugout and faints in the dugout. And they take him to the hospital. They ask him, "Are you hydrating?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm drinking gallons of water." And what they realize is that he lost all the electrolytes, and it ended up becoming more harmful to him. Do you ever have experiences like that with athletes that overdo a good thing?
Yes. I mean, of course, it's kind of, you can pick any of the nutrients and you hear certain things, and then they want to dive in. Like, back to the biohacking, like they just want to go and they want to get after it. And so, which is great, which is like, but no, we don't want anybody to faint. But I think this comes down to, you have individuals that are motivated. They hear, certain things as professionals. And I think as professionals, number one, making sure that we're providing the most direct strategy as possible. So, if you have saying to, well, make sure you hydrate effectively. Okay, that the general consumer is gonna be like, yeah, well, I need to drink water. It's like, well, how much water? And so then there's a specificity around, well, how much water do you really need to be hydrated? Well, it's about a half an ounce to an ounce per pound per day. And so you then give people thresholds, but then from there it's like, well, how do you make sure all that water is, getting sucked into the cell? And so then you have to think about, our wonderful friends of electrolytes, because, hydration, fluid follows solute. So then it's like, well, which hydration, product, or, how much sodium do I actually need to absorb that water? And there are different thresholds there. So I guess to that question, do we see people kind of take bits of information and take it to the nth degree and maybe have a negative side effect, or maybe not the right type of side effect? Of course, or the right type of adaptation. So I think for professionals, it's important, or in a team environment, making sure that you're giving the best, most specific realm of piece of information for that person. I think that's the most important thing. I thought you were going to go somewhere different with that question. I thought it was going to be like, what happened? Like, do you see people that just like don't do it at all? Like, don't care, like, or just like completely on the other spectrum. And we see that too. And like in the instance of that baseball player, his fainting episode, his tingling, his underperformance in that moment is typically then when we see people, because they're like, oh my gosh, I had this thing happen to me. I got to get it together. And so, anyways, I think like that's oftentimes when we see people and they're like, I have to dial this in. I can't do all of this myself. So we definitely see that in my recommendations to coaches without a lot of nutritional understanding or background into that specificity. Find their partner that does have that, and have that level of personalization and, again, specificity for the athletes. So you're not just giving blanket general recommendations like that, making sure they understand the nuance, and that's it's the same for the rest of us as well. Like it is about understanding the nuance.
Well, actually, you brought up an interesting point that you probably have dealt with in the past, and those are those athletes with superior ability, and they come from maybe third world countries, like a lot of them from baseball, and you look at their diets and you go, how are you doing so well? And your diet consists of oil, fried foods and candy and things like that. I mean, I've even seen baseball players that still smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of people in the world that still do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's less, but I mean, we've come a long way with that one.
Yeah, it's usually fascinating. But
yeah.
Anyway,
we had a pro cyclist that and it was more superstitious. He would have a McDonald's McFlurry before he would race. And it's because he won his first race after having a McFlurry. So in his mind, that was what he would go and do, have a McFlurry.
I think, both of those points, like when we think about nutrition, and we've spent, the majority of our time today talking about like this biochemistry, this specificity, like the ounces and the grams, and like, yes, like all of that is very important. And we can unlock levels of personalization that we just couldn't before. And we should, and we all should have those personalized strategies. But the great part about food and nutrition is it's so much more than just the fueling. And so when we see, athletes that have certain patterns, or, the way that we've associated food to life moments, like there is a psychological, community, cultural aspect of food that in this era of understanding our biology, taking it to the nth degree, we have to be cautious not to lose sight of that, because those things are important, because food brings us together. Food creates community. Food unlocks memories. Food is, it's a part of who we are, and it's a part of our society in a different way. And so it is finding the balance with those players. It's like getting to the root of, well, why do those foods matter to you so much? Like, then, what are your goals in general? And so for the younger athlete that's coming from the Dominican, having been down there when I worked with the Dodgers, like, you can see it, like, it's a different cultural environment. Then you come up here and they're learning a lot for the first time. So it's then kind of getting them to understand food in general, understanding, the power that it unlocks, and then evolving to, how do I match, my life with my fueling to the goals that I have as a high performing athlete. But there is this kind of beautiful symphony of science and culture that nutrition has in the world of high performance that, not everything else does. I don't want to say that strength training doesn't have it, Dr. Barron, but, nutrition brings a whole nother sense of community that other sports science disciplines often don't.
So our audience is composed of a lot of non-pro, and there's doctors out there. So I'm going to ask you to break down some of your most effective methods, some for the average person that wants to feel better or do better, that does exercise or does some sort of fitness activity. Where would you start with somebody like that?
Yeah, so I think, I would start with someone like that, and actually starting with most humans, but we kind of we start with, what do we believe? And so we need to believe in the power of food. And so that's number one. And so as we think about that, it's just kind of grounding everyone that we're in this world today where good nutrition advice is often getting ignored because it's too simple. Because we've convinced ourselves that it has to be complicated. And so I think that's really where we start. It's like there's a power in food. There's a power in the foundational elements. It does not have to be complex and confusing. And so I think that's where we really like to start. Then there are some really foundational components that are critical. And so, from a fueling standpoint, we talked about it with the poor baseball player that fainted at his moment. So, but hydration is key. So, how are you hydrating? I mentioned before, it's a half an ounce to an ounce of fluid per pound per day. Making sure you're getting the electrolytes to support and enhance. So I think that's number one. Number two, and that's so important. People think hydration and physical performance. A dehydrated brain is a less active brain, and a dehydrated brain can actually reduce your executive functioning. It makes you more reactive in nature. And so nobody wants to be a parent or a leader that is, reacting in the moment. So I think, hydration plays a big role in physical and mental performance. Number two is fiber. It's gotten lost in translation, and fiber is critical. So we recommend 35 grams of fiber per day. And so the different types of carbohydrate choices that you're choosing, if you're on a lower carbohydrate, making sure that you have the fiber. So fiber is critical. Protein is definitely having another moment. So, nutritional macronutrients are kind of like gene styles. So it's sometimes high-waisted are in, sometimes you're in a low rise, but sometimes it's carbohydrate, sometimes it's protein. But protein is definitely is definitely having a moment in a rightful moment. So both for women, perimenopausal women, especially menopausal women, but just in general. So getting the right amount of protein, we're recommending about 0.8 to 1 gram per pound per day, thinking about at least 25 grams of protein per seating. So at least that amount, when you're having your meals, having enough protein at each meal. Three others. So the next is fats. So fats are also critical. These are the foundational components. Essential fatty acids are making up the construct of the brain. There are many other nutrients, but essential fatty acids, specifically DHA, are impacting the brain. So you really want to think about, am I getting the right sources of fats. That is super important. We talked about recovery. So the right carb to protein ratio after your training sessions, to make sure that you're adapting appropriately. So we typically say start with protein. So 0.2 to 0.3 grams of protein per pound. Like that's how much protein you should have in that acute post-training period. And then if it's low metabolic, not a lot of fuel stores have been utilized, do a 1-to-1 carb to protein ratio. If it was super metabolic, you were really out burning through the fuel, up to a 3-to-1. So get your recovery strategy. And then the last one on the food, and then I'll pause and we can talk a little bit about supplements, is just around color. Again, like this is like back to basic stuff, but our society just does not eat enough plants. And it's like, we just don't. Like people do not. It's like eat more color on your plate. And so vegetables, fruits, lots of different, each one of those colors is representative of a certain function in the body. And so that in itself, like back to some of those nutrient deficiencies, goes a long way. And so, those are the basics. Those are the simple things. If everybody just did those things, you would have better nutrient status, you would have better glucose control, you would have better, muscular adaptation, you would have better brain function. And so if everybody could do those simple things savagely well, it would go a long way. So those are, the fundamentals from a nutritional aspect that I really think are critical, and everybody needs to be nailing on a daily basis.
I have a question.
I might get one little comment. Since it's holidays,
yeah.
The candy jar is very colorful. Does that count?
I love this. This is one of my favorite questions. I'm so glad you brought it up. Whether it was in football or baseball, sports never discriminated. So this was always when I knew, like, okay, we're making inroads. Was it Skittles or, is it candy canes? Like, hey, this is red. Is this helping with my vascular system? I'm like, yes. I'm like, did you just realize we're talking about vascular systems? I prefer you choose beets as the red, but red dye, I don't know. I mean, you make the call. So, but great. Yes, it's exactly right.
Okay. Now, my question is probably one that most people are afraid to ask. And that is, you mentioned something about fiber earlier. And I remember making a grave mistake in my second year in practice. And I was asking a patient how often, I would typically ask a patient, how often do you move your bowels? Or do you move them regularly? And they said, yes. And later I found out, but I better ask that question because they're not getting any better. I go, how often do you move your bowels? And that's the question I have for you. She said once every 2 weeks. So I realized need to ask frequency. So what, you mentioned fiber. So for the audience, how do you feel about bowel movements?
Well, bowel movements, we have to, bowel movements are a thing, and it should be happening more than every 2 weeks. So I think there is something for sure. And we have to talk about these things. And so, there is, you should be able to have consistency in your physiology and consistency in your bowel movement. So I think that's the most important thing. I would say, on a daily basis, like what is the biorhythm of your body? And so when people are, that from my perspective, when they have everything dialed in, their bowel movements are consistent. They are typically happening in similar times, with similar formations, I could go all kinds of colorful language here, but you get what I'm talking about. So I think like that consistency is indicative of your body being efficient. And so when you start to see changes in your bowel, when you start to see changes in frequency, changes in consistency, changes along those lines, that's when you have to pull back and say, hey, what's causing this? Like, is what's making this happen? And so I think, on that aspect, the way we move through our day and, how our bowel movements are showing up for us as humans is a really good indicator to, is something else going on in the body? And so, less frequent bowels, it depends on the individual, but could be a fiber element. It could be a stress response where this individual is, super stressed, or it could go the other way. And so I think being in tune with the bowels, consistency on a daily basis, as you see something become inconsistent, you got to be like, okay, what is causing that inconsistency, and how do we get back to baseline?
I think, I mean, you can determine a lot from the actual bowel movement that I know you didn't want to approach the subject at the moment. But I mean, my friends were telling me, you're 63, you should have a colonoscopy. And next thing I know, the doctor's suggesting Cologuard. So, you poop and you send it off to a lab and they'd say, okay, you're free of cancer. Good job. But I went further because I noticed bowels changing. I know that somebody out there listening to this may relate to this in some way, and it's kind of a segue into what you had just mentioned. But, there was always, if it floats, if it sinks, if it looks a certain color, if it's, soft or hard and all that, these are all textures and consistencies that you're talking about if it's changed. And so I went and got this GI mapping done through Diagnostic Solutions, and they don't sponsor me by any chance, but it was just you send off a sample and you get back this incredible, printout of your microbiome, what is in your system. And I found it was fascinating because, lately things were floating around and I thought, and they said, oh, it's steatocrit, you got fatty, there's fat in the stool. And so now there's certain supplements to take to make sure liver biles or the bile is excreting properly. You can find out so much from a bowel movement. So that, just kind of a lead into your comment before.
Yeah, I think those you're absolutely right. It can really showcase kind of what's going on, but I think the more important point there is around the microbiome. It's another area that we haven't really discussed as much. But the gut is important. There are good bacteria, there are not so good bacteria. It is a very complicated system. I often think of it like as a garden, like it needs certain nutrients, certain things need to be in the garden of the gut, in a certain level of balance. And we've learned so much, but still there's so much more to learn around, how do we think about the gut? How do we make sure the gut is in its right blend of bacteria? The role of not only fiber but essential fatty acids, etc., all play a role in the gut. Certain elements that are changing our gut microflora and making the environment not so friendly. And that's where you get into refined sugars. You get into elements like alcohol. Like these are all, like, if you remove any performance factor and we think about the end goal is like, how do we create the garden of our gut to be the most fertile and beautiful place for this bacteria to grow, that quite frankly are signaling to our brain, that are signaling to other elements of our cells. For a whole nother discussion on gut, I think we're learning so much more. So yes, on the reactive medicine side, making sure that our colons and our gut system is free of cancer and polyps is one element, but that's where traditional medicine stops. And now we have other tools and gut mapping and even other groups like Excella is another one, not sponsored, but they're a cool startup out of MIT, and they're looking at actually finding different markers, not even from the fecal matter. So there's a lot to explore here, but making sure that our gut function is at the highest level is another benefit of those foundational components that we just mentioned. And so, the impact and performance of your gut is super important as we think about the future of nutrition.
Amanda, you were about to actually segue from, proteins, fats, fibers, carbohydrates into nutrients. There is one that I'm hoping you highlight that I've been hearing a lot about on, the Instagrams and the Facebooks and things like that creatine for perimenopausal women. But go ahead, segue into what you were going to about nutrients. And if you could please make a comment about something that I see that seems to be trending lately.
Yeah, and creatine is definitely on the list. So if we think about like these core supplements, because typically, back to the biohacking, people want to start with the supplements, which is just fine. Like we can talk about that all day long. But if you're not doing the fundamentals really well, like the supplements only get you so far. But creatine for sure. So if we think about creatine in general, somewhere between 2 to 5 grams per day, or if you wanted to get much more specific, you could do 0.02 grams per pound of body weight is about how much creatine we should be thinking about per day. And this is not, this is just from a functional standpoint, like almost like a longer term, like this is, we just provide this to our body. This is not just for performance on the training floor. This is not just about creating your body's ability to do more sets and reps to create adaptation. It does that too. But creatine itself, it is utilized in the muscle for anything that is short and explosive. And so having extra creatine around to be able to do those short explosive measures is really important. Creatine is also important for maintaining muscle function. It's also found to be important in the brain. And so I think like creatine, just like protein, is having a moment, but I think that's a lot because we are really cognizant of the role that that muscle and brain play in a healthy physiology. So creatine is high on the list. I would say the omegas are also high on the list. Anywhere from 1 to 3 grams per day. We like SPMs as a form of omega that we find to be super beneficial and super absorbable. So we encourage that. Vitamin D, we should all, do you guys know what your vitamin D status is?
I when I do blood tests,
do, but
Yeah.
not
like right now.
Yeah, not right. Not this moment. Hold
Yeah.
on.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, you guys can when you are buying the Whoop strap, you can look up your vitamin D and kind of see where you're at. But knowing vitamin D, so vitamin D as well. Like so, most people need some type of vitamin D supplementation. So if you don't know what it is, then I would say 2,000 IUs per day. But if you know what it is, then you can get very targeted in how much vitamin D you're taking and then measuring it about every 6 months because it can change. All these things can change. But if you don't know what it is, vitamin D is in there. Magnesium, because we have typically seen deficiencies there, but again, would depend on status, but you're looking at about 200 milligrams.
Amanda, what was the thing you said before vitamin D? FPM, what was it that you mentioned?
They're SPMs. So these are,
SPM.
a certain type of fatty acid. So they're really, they're specialized pro-resolving mediators. So it's a certain type of fatty acid. And it's really been shown to help impact inflammation. And so they're derived from essential fatty acids. They include EPA and DHA. But we're seeing that they are really effective in especially decreasing inflammation. So, your traditional, fish oil, EPA, DHA is great. However, SPMs may be even better.
Thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I think that's about it. And I think for any of the, men and women, but especially women that are listening, checking iron status is really important. And so ferritin, hematocrit, hemoglobin, understanding what your iron status is can unlock a lot of things. And a lot of individuals, especially women, not knowingly are just like in a subclinical type of iron deficiency. There can be a lot of different root causes there. There's, if your gut is not is not functioning well, if you have some type of autoimmune that's affecting absorption, but iron is critical. So that's just another one, not for everybody to take, but for individuals to understand. And we oftentimes see, some low dose of iron that is really helpful for people to get those nutrients to a top level. So, those are the basic ones. Again, high quality multivitamin, your omegas with an SPM as a potential, newer version that is even more effective. Your vitamin D, probiotics, we mentioned them. If you're just a general probiotic, looking at 20 billion CFUs with a product that has at least 4 strains. So that would be, your traditional probiotic diet, your probiotic, magnesium, creatine, iron. So those are I think the basic ones. And then as you get more individualized, you think about other awesome presentations. Your physiology and psychology has, there's a number of other things from, curcumin to adaptogens, thinking about sleep and elements of sleep like 5-HTP or pharma-GABA. And then there's, some interesting, one other interesting supplement that's kind of gaining a lot of traction. It's called urolithin A, and it's all about gut. So, there's some elements of the urolithin A is produced in the gut, and so we're finding that it's low levels in the gut, and so can we actually just supplement with urolithin A? And so that's something that we're watching, and I think is something interesting that's coming about. Back to your comment around the gut.
All right.
Can you spell is it urolithin, like the EUR spell?
No, it's U. So UROLITHINA.
Okay, and back to the oh my gosh, the fish oils, the EPA, DHA. What was that? You said there was a new one,
Yes, so SPM.
Formula.
So SPM.
SPM.
Yeah.
Is that going to be on the bottle? If I look at the ingredients, is that what I'm looking for?
It will actually be, it will say specialized pro-resolving mediator. So it is an actual type of, type of fish oil itself. So you'll see like a fish oil, but you would want to look for SPM is typically what it's called.
Nice. I love this. Love it. Okay, Terry, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, it's okay. It's all good. I'm going to ask you to put your crystal ball in front of you, and we're having a new change in, especially politics, when it comes to food. With Kennedy coming in, where he wants to change and make people healthy again and change their food stuff. What do you see happening as a trend, if you had to look in the future, in the next 4 to 8 years? And how are you starting to adapt to work with these to address some of these changes coming down the road?
I'm so excited about these changes coming down the road, especially as it relates to thinking about making America healthy again. I think it is something that has gotten lost, and I think we've, as a country, as a global economy, it's complicated. And so, like, if I think about the next 4 to 8 years, I think this is the reset moment. This is the moment that we're pushing pause and saying, what got us here will not get us there. And the past 30 years of the mass food system, government, pharmacology, policy, look at what's happened. And so I think that in the next 4 years, it's going to be a lot of how are we setting the new foundation for what our grandchildren, great-grandchildren will think about as they fuel their body, as they think about the prioritization of the human system in a global economy. How do we move away? How in this first phase do we get people healthy and absent of disease? And that's movement, it's nutrition, it's recovery, but so much of it is individuals from the nutrition aspect being overfed and undernourished. So anyways, we're in a critical moment in time, and how do we set the foundation for new policies, for new prioritization, for new elements of funding that really create a better environment for all Americans, children to aging, to have access to the nutrients in the food that they need to be at their best. But, for us as a country to be able to maintain, our global position as a leader, because if we are a sick, undernourished population, there is no way that we can sustain our position in the global economy. So I'm super excited about where we are today.
How much do we love Amanda Carlson-Phillips? If I wasn't wearing long sleeves, I'd show you my goosebumps, but they're under wraps.
Well, you are wearing Fiore, so so am I.
Oh.
Yeah. We are partnered with Fiore, full transparency. So I love your jacket.
That's great. I didn't know. Yay. Oh,
Yay.
Amanda, that was fantastic. Terry, do you have anything before I hit her with the rapid fire 5 questions?
Hit her, baby.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Amanda, this is where I know you're going to do well because you think quick and you're on your toes, but we got 5 rapid fire questions for you that we love asking guests. They're really random. Some have nothing to do with nothing but you. Are you ready?
Okay. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Is there a holiday treat or something you secretly indulge in, even if it's not the healthiest option?
I love mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese, so they will be on my plate at Thanksgiving.
I love it.
In large portions.
That's great. In large portions. That's it. Fantastic.
I'm just saying.
All right. Question number 2. Eggnog, hot cocoa, or mulled wine. Which holiday beverage do you prefer, and do you have a healthier spin on it?
I love wine, and so wine will be in my glass. And I don't discriminate on color of wine, so there will be. I will be having a rainbow of wine over the holidays. But there's no doubt that alcohol is a recovery killer. So I would say if you want a healthier version of your traditional alcoholic drinks, it's just drink less of them.
You know, it's interesting. Sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
No, I was just saying, she talked about color of wine. There's your colorful plate. You just have it instead of on your plate, you have it in your glass.
I know, it's really bad. It doesn't end up in the same way, but it does. But yeah, I rationalize that like you will your candy canes now. So.
You know, actually, as a side note, it's fascinating. I have a patient that's a manager of a huge wine distributing company. My ex-wife works for a wine distributing company. And they both told me, because a lot of the influencers have an effect on the fact that they're telling you that wine is a brain killer. I mean, it just has no purpose for anti-aging and longevity. And their sales have gone down for the first time.
I mean, I know this is rapid fire, but alcohol consumption in general, especially by millennials, Gen Z, the younger ages, and kind of, I think at the older ages, it's down about 30%. So I think, again, we're waking up to the facts like alcohol, not so good for the gut, not so good for sleep. So anyways, I can't tell you how to make a healthier cocktail, but other than just drink less of the alcohol. Not much fun. That's like a party pooper.
Well, yeah, but those Gen Zers are smoking pot instead of drinking wine. So
I know.
that's
why we got to dig into the research. I'm like, is this a shift in recreational use, or is this a complete abandonment of recreational consumption? So I don't know.
Or
we can look at that together.
It may be a financial thing that they don't own the wineries, but they own the pot farms. So they're gonna. Yeah.
I mean, who knows? We'll have to see. So more options.
Question number 3, Amanda. If you could recommend one superfood to include in a holiday meal, what would be a good nutritional boost and why?
The holiday meals. So I would encourage. The first thing that comes to mind is cinnamon, and so it's kind of like a seasoning of the season, and so incorporating cinnamon that really helps with stabilizing glucose. So I think little cinnamon in your yams, little cinnamon over here, little spice of the season. So go for cinnamon.
Does a cinnamon bun in the morning count?
Well, you do have cinnamon on there. And so if you sprinkle some extra cinnamon on your cinnamon bun, that it should give you a little bit of help from a metabolic standpoint to metabolize all of that sugar.
I love it.
I don't know how much, but it can make you feel better too.
Dunkin' Donuts will still love you for this. That's right. Good. Okay. Question number 4, Amanda. As someone deeply involved in performance motivation, do you have a unique holiday tradition that helps you unwind or recharge during this whole festive season?
So I think the strategy that becomes even more important in the festive season is light exposure in the morning. So I've gotten really protective of my sleep, and I know that the wine in multiple colors will be in my glass. So how do I protect my circadian rhythm? So light exposure in the morning, I think, is one of the most important things to stay consistent with. And so if I get my light exposure with my mountain bike ride or my run, then I can combine those two things. So movement and light exposure are the strategies that I think about.
Nice. All right, final question of the rapid fire questions, number 5. Unexpected talents. If you could instantly acquire a new skill or talent unrelated to your professional expertise, what would it be and how would you use it during the holidays?
Oh my gosh, I want to play the piano. And so I played piano when I was little and I just like totally abandoned it. And I've had this urge to just be able to play the piano. So if I could have like a magic, superpower just come down and I could automatically play the piano, it would be a party. We would have carols going on. I would be playing during the parties. It would be amazing. So if you could make that happen, like I would have the best holiday season ever.
Did I hear like a New Year's resolution in there somewhere?
I think I did. Yeah, I think you did.
I know. I think it's time. It's really calling me. I gotta figure this out. So 2025 is gonna be Amanda's year of the piano.
There you go.
That's all right. I like it. Hey, those were great answers to all those 5 questions. Amanda, you are spectacular. I love your energy. Fantastic. Terry, any comments?
No, my only comment is thank you for your time. I mean, this went by so fast and I just met you and I could talk to you for hours. So Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and help these people get healthier in the holidays.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me. It's been super fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Crackin Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.